"Get up, girl, get up, my beautiful copper penny," I pleaded, but Penny didn't move. I stopped begging out loud. Instead, I fought as hard as I could. "Please, baby, please," I said in my heart. Penny's eyes found mine. Her ears stood up. She waffled. "There's my penny girl, baby," I kept saying in my head. She raised her head. She struggled and rolled, and with each roll everyone pulled on the ropes. Finally she rolled up onto her front legs, and then with a hearty groan gave one last push that brought her to both legs. She was weak, but she was up. We all stayed with her through the night, loosening the ropes bit by bit as she supported more and more of her own weight. Doc Beck stayed by her side all night. Her breathing became clearer and clearer. He gave her more shots to help. He kept listening to her chest with a stethoscope. We kept searching his face. Near morning he listened again. He snorted and puffed his unlit cigar for a moment. Then he beamed into a broad smile. "She's past this here crisis," he announced. "This mare is going to be fine, just fine." Donnie and Nancy cried. Mrs. Mack kept patting their shoulders, saying, "We did it, we did it." I noticed old Hap sneaking away like his quiet self. I ran over to him and tugged his hand. "Thank you, Hap, thank you," I cried. He hugged me. Tears ran down his old, rough face. Mrs. Mack hugged both of us. The three of us seemed almost like we were one. As Hap turned to leave, he simply put up one of his hands. He pushed it toward me, and with the other hand pointed to the horseshoe nail ring and smiled. When that summer ended, I wept the bitterest tears of my life, only to shed tears of pure joy as I went back to the little stable every summer for the next 7 years. Dogpatch and the folks who were at the stable on the night of the crisis were changed after that summer. Old Hap was a new man. In time he took a wife, the widow who lived across the street. He became known as a helpful, almost jolly neighbor there in Dogpatch. Donnie had his dream too, to be a veterinarian like Doc Beck. He went to a veterinary school right there in Lansing. No one really knows who helped him, but we have a good idea. Donnie returned to Dogpatch long enough to marry Nancy. Then they moved down to Shelbyville, Tennessee. Mrs. Mack gave Penny to me to have for my very own that next summer, and I kept Penny at my dad's until I was 18 and went away to college. Then Dad returned Penny to Mrs. Mack and her farm in Ashley, Michigan. In the summer of my 26th year, I visited Mrs. Mack on that little farm with my 2 small children. She led us to the meadow where Penny stood. Penny turned and looked at me and waffled. She walked slowly toward me. Her muzzle was flecked with gray, but her eyes were still full of grace and intelligence. Her neck still arched and her tail held high. My eyes followed her contours once again. She was still perfect. She stood there while the sun danced through the leaves of the overhanging trees, her coat gleaming like a bright copper penny. In the winter of my 30th year, my father called to tell me that my sweet copper penny had died. Patricia. She was almost 28 years old. "What a horse! What a horse!" he said over and over. "Mrs. Mack told me to tell you that she kept her promise." I knew that she would.